Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to business law class. Today we are going to start with the very first session, and our first session is going to be about what a contract is in business related activities. In organizations, when we talk about contract, how we should address our queries. So this is a little bit about what a contract is. First definition is by Pollock. Every agreement and promise enforceable at law is a contract. So agreement and promise which is enforceable at or by law is a contract. Second definition is again a very simple one. A contract is an agreement creating and defining obligations between the parties. So a party, two parties, one could be me, other could be you, or it could be two different entities, two different businesses that are coming across, that are forming a contract. All right. Now, definition of contract under section US2H is an agreement enforceable by law is a contract, and I'm sure this is very simple to remember. So now I've repeatedly used a word enforceable. What is the meaning of enforceable? An agreement is enforceable if it is recognized by court in order to be enforceable by law. The agreement must create legal obligations between the parties, and that is the understanding, right? Types of agreements. The social agreement. Social agreements are not enforceable because they do not create legal obligations between parties. Example, invitation for dinner. Legal agreement. Legal agreements are enforceable because they create legal obligations between parties. Example, A promises to sell his car to B. Contract Act. Alright, so for a contract, let's go into simplified understanding of what contract must have. There are two basic ingredients for a contract: agreement and enforceability. What is agreement? In agreement, there should be an offer, and there should be someone who accepts it. Now going back to enforceability. What is enforceability? It's a legal obligation between parties, and it is enforceable by law, court of law. Okay? Essentials of valid contract. Essentials of valid contract: offer and acceptance, legal obligation, lawful consideration, capacity of parties, free consent. Lawful object, in writing and registration, certainty of terms, possibility of performance, and not expressly declared void. Let's now go into detail of each and every one of these. Offer and acceptance. An offer, an agreement, there must be a lawful offer by one party and lawful acceptance of that offer by other party. The term lawful means that offer and acceptance must satisfy the requirements of Contract Act. Let's go over the example. A offers to sell his cycle to B for rupees 45,000. This is an offer. If B accepts this offer, there is an acceptance. Legal obligation. Alright. For legal obligations, the parties to an agreement must create legal obligation. It means that if one party does not fulfill his promise, he shall be liable for breach of contract. Let's get the meaning of it with the help of an example. A offers to B to sell his home for rupees 2 million. It is a contract as it creates legal obligation. Lawful consideration. For a valid contract, consideration must be lawful. Consideration is the price paid by one party for the promise of the other party. A contract is enforceable only when both parties give and take something. That something given or taken is called consideration. Example, A promised to sell his car to B for 1 million. For A, the 1 million is consideration, and for B, car is consideration. Capacity of parties. An agreement is enforceable if it is made by parties who are the competent to contract. To be competent to contract, it is essential that the parties are of the age of majority and they have sound mind. Example, M, a person of unsound mind agrees to sell his house to S for rupees 2 lakhs. It is not a valid contract because M is of unsound mind. So it is challengeable in the court of law. All right. Free consent. For a valid contract, it is essential that the consent of parties must be free. Consent is free when it is not obtained by force, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, or any kind of mistakes. If the consent of either party is not free, the agreement cannot become a contract. Example, A forced B at gunpoint to enter into a contract. Think about it. Will it be a valid contract? Here we have unsound mind, capacity of contract, and then we have free consent. For valid contract. Okay. Lawful objectives. It is necessary that agreement is made for a lawful object. The object of contract must not be illegal, immoral, opposed to public policy. Every agreement with unlawful object is illegal and therefore contract is void. For example, A hires a house to use for gambling. The object of agreement is illegal and void because in Pakistan gambling is not legal, right? Writing and registration. A contract may be oral or in writing. It is preferable that the contract be in writing because it is easy to prove in court. Now, certainty of terms. The terms and conditions of a contract must be clear, complete, and certain. If the terms are uncertain, the agreement is void. There should be very clear understanding of the period, when, at what time, since and from you expect the contract to be in place, and when the deliverables, be it services, be it goods, be it an understanding, should be achieved. So there's a deadline to it as well. Certainty of terms and conditions. Okay, it should be clear and complete and certain. A promises to sell 200 books to B without specifying their titles. The agreement is void because the terms are not clear. Possibility of performance. A valid contract must be capable of being performed. An agreement to do an impossible act is void. I'm repeating myself. A valid contract must be capable of being performed. It's very important. An agreement to do an impossible act is void. Anything that's impossible, it's beyond your capacity, capability, that will make the contract void. If the act is legal or physically impossible to perform, the agreement cannot be enforceable by law. Example, A agrees with B to discover a treasure by magic. The agreement cannot be enforced. Kinds of contracts. There are 4 types of contracts: according to enforceability, according to formation, according to performance, and according to parties. Kinds of contract. According to enforceability is the first type. According to enforceability, our contract can be divided as under valid contract, void agreement, unenforceable contract, illegal agreement. A valid contract. A valid contract is enforceable by law. An agreement becomes enforceable by law when all the essentials of a valid contract are present. Obligations of parties. In a valid contract, all parties are legally responsible for the performance of the contract. If one of the parties breaches the contract, the other party can enforce it through court of law. Example, if A agrees to sell a car to B, if it fulfills all the essentials of a contract, it is a valid contract. If A fails to deliver the fails to deliver the car, B can sue him, and if B fails to, like versa, right? According to enforceability, B. Void contract. The term void contracts means not binding by the law. A contract which is not enforceable by the law is a void contract. Obligations of parties. A contract becomes void due to impossibility of performance. A contract becomes void before performance when it becomes impossible to be performed by any party due to following reasons. Impossibility of performance, subsequential illegality, rejection of voidable contract, and impossibility of the pending event. According to enforceability, C is void agreement. An agreement not enforceable by law is said to be void. The void agreement does not create any illegal obligations among parties. An agreement which is void from the beginning is a void agreement. A promise to buy a cow from B for 25,000 rupees. The cow was dead before the contract. Both parties were unaware. It was nature's hand that actually, because of which the cow died. So, the agreement is void. According to enforceability, D. Voidable contract. It is voidable contract when the consent of one of the parties is not free. Contract which has been made on by using false means through fraud and misrepresentation. Example, D forces Q to sell his car at gunpoint. A deceives B by stating that his factory produces 10 million kg of sugar monthly, induces B to buy it. The contract is voidable. Kinds of contract. According to enforceability, E, section E, enforceable contract. An unenforceable contract is that contract which cannot be enforced in a court of law because of some technical defects and faults such as absence of writing, registration, requisite stamps, etc. Sample. A bro A borrows rupees 1 billion from B and makes a pro note on rupees 10 stamp paper. It is unenforceable because pre-note is undervalued. According to enforceability. F. Illegal agreement. An agreement is illegal when its performance is forbidden by any law. Such an agreement can never become a contract. An agreement is illegal and void if it is forbidden by law or is of such a nature that if permitted. Example, A gives B money to buy smuggling goods. The agreement is illegal and the money cannot be recovered. Kinds of contract. Second, according to formation. According to formation, a contract has the following three kinds: express contract, implied contract, and quasi contract. According to formation, express contract. Express contract is one in which is expressed in words spoken or written. When such a contract is formed, there is no difficulty in understanding the rights, terms, obligations, and conditions of a contract. Example: A gives his house on rent to B on per month rupees 10,000 and for 1 year of period. A mentioned terms and conditions on paper. Very simple. According to formation. Implied contract. An implied contract is made without any words spoken and written. It arises from acts, conduct of parties, course of dealing, or circumstances. Example: A went into a restaurant and had a cup of tea. It is implied contract that A will pay for the cup of tea. Quasi contract of contracts according to formation. In a quasi contract, the law imposes certain obligations under some special circumstances. It is based upon the principle of equity, that a person shall not get allowed to get benefits at the cost of another. Example: A finds lost goods of B. A is bound legally to return goods back to B. Now, third of kinds of contract, third type of contract, according to performance. According to performance, a contract is of following two kinds: executed, executory contract. According to performance, executed contract is said to be executed when both the parties have completely performed the applications. It means that nothing remains to be done by either party under the contract. Example: A buys a book from B. A delivers the books. B pays the price. It's an executed contract. According to performance, executory contract. An executory contract, something remains to be done. In other words, a contract is said to be executory when both parties to a contract have to perform the applications. M sells his car to N for 1 million. N has not yet paid and M has not delivered the car. So it is in the state of execution. Fourth, according to parties. According to parties, a contract may be of following two kinds: unilateral contract, bilateral contract. Unilateral contract. In a unilateral contract, only one party has commitment. In other words, it's a contract where only one party is bound, but the other party chooses to be bound by it. A promises to pay 10,000 to anyone who finds his lost bag. B finds the bag and returns it to A. It's a unilateral contract. According to parties, bilateral contract. It is a contract where both parties are bounded to perform certain duties, responsibilities, and obligations. A promises to supply raw material and B promises to pay the price of raw material to A. Discharge of a contract. By following modes in which a contract may be discharged: by performance, by mutual agreement, by impossibility of performance, by operation of law, by breach. By performance. When the parties of the contract have duly performed their respective promises undertaken by them, the contract comes to an end. By mutual agreement. A contract comes into being by the agreement between two parties. Therefore, it may also be discharged by their mutual agreement and willingness. By the impossibility to perform. If the performance of contract becomes or turns out to be impossible, the parties to the contract are discharged from their respective obligations by operation of law. Sometimes the performance of a contract is discharged by the operation of some law. For instance, as soon as a person is discharged by an order of court. By breach, when one party to the contract breaks the contract by non-performance of the promise or otherwise, the other party is discharged from his obligation under the contract and has right of action against the party responsible for the breach. Thank you, class. I'm going to load our next part of contract law after some time. I would like you to go over this thoroughly, and I would expect a feedback from you. Inshallah, pretty soon I'll be assigning an assignment to you once I'm done with all 3 parts of contract law. Thank you. Have a nice day.